And welcome once more to Legs Talk About Books, the occasional literature podcast where we talk about books. I am a Hardleg Joe, if you didn't know, joined as always by Mr. CB Radio.
Yes, the CB stands for reading books.
Yes, exactly, if you didn't know. Here on camera, trying out something new, unless we're not. We're also doing this live on Twitch, which is something new. Shouldn't really affect anything for the people who are watching on YouTube, because I'm still going to edit this. You're not going to get the live thing, but if you wanted to see it live, unedited, we might do this again. Yeah. Hard to say, hard to leg. Either way, today we are here because we've got another Patreon request, this time from 3Do9, who wanted us to read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, which famously got made into a movie that had, what's her name? From the...
Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman.
Yes.
I only really know her from Star Wars.
Wow. Just
one of those star things.
Star Wars, as well as, I believe, Pirates of the Caribbean, where she was Elizabeth Swann.
Was she?
Yeah.
That was Elizabeth Taylor.
No, she was Elizabeth Swann and then became Elizabeth Turner. Because she marries him. Spoiler alert, she marries him in the third movie.
Spoilers for like a 10-year-old movie or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's pretty much all I knew about this going in. I had seen trailers for the movie and it always looked kind of neat, but I just haven't seen like a new movie in like 10 years. I've seen a couple, but I very, very rarely watch movies. I've read more books than I've seen movies in the last like 5 years or so.
Well, that's because we at one point had a monthly literature podcast.
Yes. We don't have that anymore, but I still read a lot of books.
Yeah.
I just don't have to devote the time to editing it and stuff like that, unless someone pays for it. Which again, thank you 3Do for allowing us to do that.
Our hats are off to use.
Yes.
Mine is. His is going to stay.
Nah, mine's staying on.
Yeah,
I've got a weird like do-rag thing underneath and it looks weird.
Yeah, I just constantly take my hat off because I enjoy it.
Yeah, he's here in the chat. He's doing the little cats in the chat. So adorable. But yes, if you're unfamiliar with the podcast and how we do things, basically, we're not going to hold your hand here. We're going to do some spoiler-free thoughts, sort of telling about if we recommend the book, what we liked, what we didn't like.
Yep.
And then after that, we're just going to jump in, discussing it. And if you're going to assume that either you've already read it, or you're not going to read it. We don't really sit here and do like a synopsis.
Yeah.
Although we do talk about cool stuff we like, and you might be able to get an idea. But...
Admittedly, this one is so short that I feel like our discussion will probably encapsulate the synopsis.
Yeah. I will say, if nothing else, this is quite a thin book. I believe you did the audiobook for this, right?
Most of the audiobooks we did before on different ones were like 10, 15, some 40 hours. This one was 5.
Yeah, this is 5 hours. This is like, the movie was 2 hours, so it was like almost double the length. But for a book, being able to read it in 5 hours, pretty easy. And I will say, if nothing else, this is a very engrossing book. It really kind of drags you in. I sat down intending to maybe I'll finish this by the end of the month, read like a half an hour each day. And I basically finished this in 3 sessions. Like, I read the first couple chapters, then I read the second half of the book, and then finished the third half of it, which makes it sound like I should be splitting it by thirds and not halves. But that's just the weird science fiction elements of this. Ooh, how is this book made of 3 halves?
No, we're not doing Lovecraftian stuff.
No.
The author doesn't want us to do Lovecraftian stuff.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. This time, most of our questions were provided by 3Do. And I guess a little spoiler before we get into that, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is that a lot of people would describe this book as Lovecraftian, or if nothing else, cosmic horror. And apparently the author really doesn't like that label for a number of reasons. I did end up reading a review and a couple different things he's written about it, so I kind of understand that. And that seemed to be the main thing that 3Do was curious about, so we'll talk about that. But first, again, just spoiler-free thoughts. Obviously, we were both engrossed by it. We were both like, this is a book that you could really get into. It really sucks you in. It's got that, what I would call the new age of science fiction building, which is the J.J. Abrams puzzle box style, where it really is like, here's a mystery, and you want to keep reading because you want to discover more mysteries. And then in trying to do that, you get a little bit of a solution, but you also find another mystery, something that continues to drive you onwards. It really is kind of a story that I'm not sure would hold up on a second read-through, specifically because it's like so much of it is keeping you engrossed with wondering what's happening, what's coming next, which is very like a modern style. If you look at something older like Dune or even some of the old like pulpy science fiction, there's a lot more sense of like you kind of know what you're getting into.
And also, a lot of those other books and stories had to basically set up an entire weird world, whereas this one has a lot more ground to it that it gives in. Yeah. Admittedly, it does have a weird setting, but most of the stuff that they talk about that involves not the weird setting is pretty easy to understand.
I guess we should give just a very basic, like, back of the book style synopsis for this, if you have no idea what this is at all. Basically, it's the story of 4 scientists, I guess we could call them, professionals. It's a biologist, an anthropologist, a psychologist, and one that doesn't end with "ist" that I can never remember. Surveyor, yeah, that's the last one. And they get sent into a basically an anomalous zone called Area X, a spot in the United States where something unexplained has happened.
Is it the United States? I don't remember the state.
Yeah, they said it's the Northeast.
Okay, I always thought that it was just a very ambiguous country in an ambiguous place.
It could be, but I think everything they describe about it says that it's like United States. Northeastern United States, up by the coast, because part of it does take place near an ocean.
Admittedly, I did say that everything outside of the weird area that they're at does feel kind of grounded, but it also is oddly obscured at the same time.
Yeah, this story has a lot of like unsettlingness to it. You start inside the zone, and even though you get flashbacks talking about her life before she went into it, the biologist is the main character. You really aren't super grounded. It has almost like a dreamlike quality where you're not sure exactly what's real. There's an element, which I don't think is spoilers because it's in like the first chapter. They have an element of hypnosis in the story where the psychologist on the team has implanted a bunch of hypnotic suggestions, specifically to keep them calm in Area X. Apparently, it drives a lot of people to do crazy things. Previous investigators have killed themselves or killed each other or disappeared entirely.
And he didn't want it to be Lovecraftian.
Yeah. You know, it's just a mysterious zone that drives everyone in it mad. There's nothing Lovecraftian about that at all.
No, it's not like there are only 3 good options in Lovecraft, where you die, you go mad, or you become the creature, and the death one is the good one.
Yeah. And it again, going with the things that it has in common, like it's a bunch of scientists. It's the whole book is set up as a journal being kept by one of the scientists, the biologist. It immediately sets you off as a mystery. You're in this place, you don't know what its deal is, the characters don't know what the deal is, and they immediately set you off as like, you can't trust them because they're under hypnotic suggestions. They're occasionally like losing consciousness or unsure of what just happened or being pushed into feeling a certain way by a hypnotic suggestion. And you're unsure if it's a part of the area or part of the hypnosis. And if the hypnosis is that strong, it kind of gets you to question, like, how much of before the area is actually true. Yeah. Maybe they can implant memories or something like that.
They do touch on that for like half a second and then don't touch on it further.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a drop thread I didn't like, but that might have been something. That's a spoiler thing later, But
yeah, so as I was saying, it really is that mystery box style format. It gets you in with a very, very vague, mysterious thing, and kind of like the best mystery boxes. Early Lost, I'm thinking of. It's one of those ones where it sets you up with something mysterious in order to introduce you to an interesting character. And then you get kind of invested in that character, and then even if things aren't completely satisfactorily resolved, you're so invested in their story and how they're dealing with it that you don't really care as much about the mystery. You were just kind of happy to go along with the story. I often feel like I talk bad about the mystery box format because I personally don't enjoy it very much. But it is very effective, and I think this is probably one of the best examples of that new style formula.
Not to get on too much of a tangent, I don't think that the problem with it with yourself or with myself with the mystery box, because I'm not a big fan of it either, isn't so much that it is being used, it's that it's being used improperly.
Yeah.
And over improperly.
There's a lot of people who just use the format without understanding its strengths. They just use the mystery to hook people in a very cynical way to sell more things or to keep people invested when they don't have anything else to prop it up.
And find out next time about when... No,
yeah, kind of like the latter half of Lost. I didn't even watch Lost. I've just been watching a series on YouTube looking into it.
It all ends in a church.
Yeah. Where it's just like, the very first season, they had a very clear idea. And then they were like, we need 10 more seasons of this. And basically they just had to run and keep coming up with mysteries and keep making more unexplained stuff until it ended up being a mess that was so big you couldn't possibly give satisfying answers to anything.
Yeah, that's the problem of a mystery box, is that it breaks down if you keep using... Like,
basically, the longer it goes on, the more chance it has to break down, which is why, this is 5 hours long, a very short read, and pretty good example of that kind of story.
And yet they still don't answer a lot of the stuff, but in a satisfying way, though.
But there is more than one book that does kind of go into things. And I will say, just very, very briefly, because I've started this book, I'm only like a third of the way through. In reading about this book, I was told that it wasn't a true sequel, that it was related to the first story, but was about the people outside of the Area X, about the government agency. And that's true about it being outside, but it is absolutely a sequel. Yeah. It does take place immediately afterwards and does deal with the characters from the first series.
It does with the repercussions of that, yeah.
Yeah, I can explain a little bit later for those of you who have read the book, but for those of you who don't, just know this is actually a sequel. It's also a lot thicker, a bit slower so far, but still pretty interesting. But yeah, to bring all of this back, because we were doing the spoiler-free thoughts, which usually comes with a recommendation. So I would say, if you like character-driven stories, sort of wrapped in a science fiction bow, if you like mysteries, if you can get really engrossed with it, this is really, really well written. This will keep you engrossed. This is worth the 5 hours of your time. I don't think it's, like, life-changing. I didn't come away, like, really experiencing some new concept. But I can see how it might be for some people.
I can understand how it could be for some people, but it is a very narrow mindset.
Yeah, like it definitely has themes it's trying to explore. There's definitely a character working through some stuff from their past. And if you're like her or been in a situation like her, then you might come away with this really kind of learning something about life. Didn't do that for me, though. The ending didn't really let me down, but it was just sort of like acceptable. I guess is the best way to describe it, right?
It was a good wrap-up, at least.
Yeah. They tried their best to explain what I really needed explained. It wasn't necessarily satisfying, but at least there was an answer.
Yeah.
And her character arc kind of wrapped up really nicely. So it worked out in that regard.
And also, a side little recommendation. If you enjoyed this, if you have read this and enjoyed this book, I would recommend checking out some of the stories on the SCP Foundation. I talk about them all the time. But yeah, like this story is incredibly reminiscent of that. And I would recommend checking out anything involving their tales or their stories.
It really depends on where you go on SCP, because some of them are better than others.
Yeah, but again, it's the same flavor in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, 3Do in chat is like, Area X is 100% an SCP. And it is. Yeah. The difference is, I think we were talking about this earlier, you're like, this is like a... what would be the word? This is like an incompetent SCP organization. Or as I would say, a realistic SCP organization, where their ability to keep things secret, their ability to organize things, isn't as top tier as like the SCP.
Especially since this is a chunk out of the middle of America, or
Yeah.
a portion of America. So,
Like,
yeah.
They've kept people away from it, but whether or not they've contained it, not really.
They're not getting that C part of the SCP part real done.
No, they've secured it.
And they're protecting something, but yeah.
They're trying to, but whether or not they're succeeding, hard to say. But yeah, that's what we have to say about it without getting into spoilers. If you're interested in reading the book, go ahead and pick it up. Again, it's pretty cheap, pretty old. I believe also, if you want to, they have the whole audiobook just on YouTube.
Yeah, it was completely...
Someone's just posted it, so you can just go watch it for free if you want to.
That's how I did it.
Yeah. I thought you still had Audible.
Nope. My Audible somehow took away all my points.
Oh, a sad state of affairs.
3 points, and they took them away.
Just hats off. So yeah, if you want to read it, go ahead and read it. Otherwise, we're just going to jump right into spoiler-free thoughts. We're just going to start discussing it and assume that you already know what's going on. So yeah, I hope you're prepared for that. And as I stated earlier, I think the first question and the thing that 3Do really wanted us to talk about was, is this Lovecraftian?
Yes.
And I'm curious...
Yes, there's like the amount of undescribed things that are meant to be like mentally scarring, the fact that the entire place causes madness, the fact that the narrator is an intellectual, and then fourthly the fact that it is in the first person, which is a lot of Lovecraftian stories. It like the amount of similarities between there is undeniable.
Yeah. So there's that's kind of what I was thinking going into it. And then again, I did read an interview with the author and also looked into another thing. And there seems to be two main reasons why he doesn't think it's Lovecraftian. One is almost like a personal beef of his with Lovecraft, and the idea that Lovecraft basically gets credit for all weird fiction.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, he's basically like, there was a whole lot of people writing all sorts of weird, scary stuff around that time. Yes, a lot of it ended up being, like, done really well by Lovecraft, but he would prefer, like, another term that doesn't tie it to one person.
Cosmic horror.
Although cosmic horror doesn't really appeal so much to this, because it's not really dealing with space or... He wants to call it like new weird fiction or weird. Just keep the old weird fiction.
Don't put new. It slows it down. Weird fiction.
Neo weird fiction.
That's how you make it space agents. Interesting.
Yeah, and apparently he while he has read some Lovecraft, he didn't really like what he read, and so he was inspired by a lot of other authors. He basically kind of makes the claim that he came to a Lovecraftian thing, it was via reading other stuff and coming into that from a different route and arriving at the same place.
Well, life spoiler alert, most of Lovecraftian stories aren't done by Lovecraft. It's just his mythos is kind of permeated.
Yeah, well, he's just basically saying he wasn't inspired by Lovecraft. He sort of came to the idea separately.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it doesn't matter how you come to a genre. If you end up writing a story about the Western United States with cowboys and Native Americans and stuff, you've written a Western.
Yeah.
If it looks like a duck, if it talks like a duck.
It's a duck.
Yeah. So that's part of it. But the other half actually does make a good point. Where he says, yes, there's a lot of the like aesthetic outer trappings of Lovecraft. Like you could look at the stuff of like, yeah, it's by a scientist. It's written in a journal. They're exploring the unknown. There's a thing that drives people crazy. But he argues that the core essence of Lovecraft is this idea of sort of like ignorance is bliss, or knowledge is painful. Knowledge drives you mad. There's this inherent thing. Basically, every Lovecraft story, as you said, ends with you become the monster, you go mad, or you die.
I think that a good sentence would be that it's a true fear of discovering the unknown, not just like of the unknown.
What's the old saying, right? He's like, humanity is an island of ignorance surrounded by terror, and driving the ship out will only lead to bad things.
I've never heard that, but it sounds both beautiful and haunting, and I love it.
Yeah, and the thing he argues is that doesn't happen in this story.
That is a fair
In
argument.
fact, the entire arc of this character is basically finding out that she is an insignificant part of a much grander thing, that there are like fifth dimensional beings out there that are beyond her comprehension, and instead of running away from it or going mad, she decides that one of the real things that still exists is the love she has for her husband. And regardless of all that, she is going to go out and at least try to find what happened to him. She is dedicated to learning more, even though what she learns not only threatens to drive her mad, but causes her intense pain.
Yeah, I did kind of see that as that, like, the story kind of concluded with her being able to step out. Because in the story, when she's narrating it, she's very self-centered.
Yeah.
And yet she does have remorse, but it's not like she's thinking of others. She's just doing what she thinks is best. And then at the end, she kind of steps back and actually realizes some of the like
her flaws and everything.
Not only her flaws, but like the feelings of other people that she has, like her husband.
Yeah, that she has wronged in the past by not letting him into her life in a way that she really probably should have.
It's kind of like she was very much just an observer of life. Specifically, a great example of that is when she was just looking at the pool. That's all that. Like, she didn't want to touch it. She didn't want to put anything with it. She didn't want to mess with it. She just wanted to watch.
Yeah. She's a biologist in that sense. She observes life, but she doesn't interact with life. And she comes to regret that at the end. But, again, as I said, it's the whole moral, the end twist of it is that rather than having a sad ending, the ending's kind of almost hopeful.
Yeah.
Like, despite all the bad things, despite the fact that she knows she's probably going to die out there and never make it back, she's eager to spend her last moments learning and exploring. Rather than run away from the darkness, she wants more.
It's the same thing. Like I said, you either die, you go mad, you become the monster. She is most likely, and she knows it, going to become the monster. But it's not like other like stories like that we've been talking about, Lovecraft, where it's just like, and I become the monster, and I feel nothing but hate and hunger. It's like, I'm gonna become the monster, but before I do that, I'm gonna find out about my husband.
I'm going to go do some stuff and some things. So I can see where he's coming from on that perspective.
Yes.
If you look at the themes of Lovecraft, this is absolutely not the themes.
Yeah,
it has the same trappings of it, the same outer shell, but the core is fundamentally different.
Yeah, they're two trains going in opposite directions, but on the same track.
Yeah. So I would say, I think at the end of the day, I think when it comes to labels, the whole point of labels is that they're useful for communicating things to other people. And regardless of what you think of Lovecraft or his work or his influence, if I describe this as Lovecraftian, you get an idea of what I'm talking about. There are a lot of elements of this that are associated with Lovecraft, so I think it's a good, useful title. Oh, hey, thank you, Genkill213 for the Tier 1 sub. 12 months.
My heart is you.
Yeah. Isn't the thing from the center of the zone literally from a meteor? We don't know.
Again, most of this story is like, we have to find out about this unknown. And then when she actually gets to that, she makes this turnaround of, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
Like, the things that I already knew, I should have been paying more attention to. And she goes off to that. And it's not so much like in Lovecraft where she sees this unknown and it drives her mad because she'll never understand it. She sees that she won't understand that, and she's
fine with that.
She discards that.
Yeah. She's driven by that curiosity to find out what it is, but she gets as close to it as anyone could without being absorbed into it.
And it literally causes her, like, enough pain for her to be racked with sobs on the ground, clutching
it almost
herself.
kills her.
Yeah.
And it was just that, I guess, that realization of, like, what else are you going to do with that knowledge? Like, you can't possibly get closer. You can't understand it more. Like, it's beyond our understanding. So just deal with something else.
Yeah.
Just move on and go do something else.
It's kind of the, like, if you've ever gotten too frightened by a Lovecraft story, this kind of feels like the story where, like, read this, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
It teaches you to just be like,
to just move on.
But what if there is an unknowable deity out there that will rise and destroy? Don't worry about it. Just go talk to your husband. It'll be fine.
Just you had love in your life. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, and they don't belittle it. They don't make it seem small. They make
they don't even necessarily say it's like love. It's just more like human connections in general. The relationships that people build are important.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just saying, you know,
we've gone on a tangent.
We got distracted by the sub. But overall, like, I would say it's Lovecraftian. I would just put like a little asterisk there, you know.
Yeah.
It's not exactly like Lovecraft, but if you like this weird, mysterious stuff with things you can't comprehend and scientists, all that stuff's in here. All that stuff that you kind of associate it with. It just has a different, like, lesson at the end, a different core idea. Yeah, King Beevy's like, ants don't think about the day-to-day of humans. You don't know what ants think. They might. They might be worried, but I get the idea he's kind of going for, you know. If you there's this idea in Lovecraftian fiction of like finding out that you're amoeba compared to these complex organizations, and Lovecraft is like, well, that means your life is useless, and this is more like because it's got that biologist look to it, right? It's like, yeah, discovering you're not the top of the train is fine, but I mean, the ants go about their life, the amoebas continue to do amoeba stuff. They don't worry.
I like to think of it as like the person stares into the abyss and a giant tendrilled creature is like, serve me. And they're like, huh. Walks off to the sex. Like,
they're like, oh, I don't want to deal with that.
Walks off and cooks their eggs or something. Yeah. Like,
I'll do my other stuff. Otherwise, you end up like the lighthouse man.
Yeah, I got laundry to do. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to discussion point number 2. Do you plan to read the other 2 books in the series?
I plan on doing the same thing we did with The Wheel of Time. I'm going to let this dickhead read the books and read one of them and be like, oh, that was pretty good. Be like, oh, I'll read it maybe. I'll read the third one. He'll tell me everything that happens in it.
Yeah, which I'm in the second one right now. Again, obviously, yes. Not sure about the third one. I didn't buy the whole series.
You haven't bought fully into it yet.
No, and this one, it's
bureaucracy.
There is a bureaucracy. I think I've heard someone say that, like, where this is sort of like Lovecraftian horror, this is more like Kafka-esque.
Oh no, I don't want to. No.
It's getting tied up in like no one knows who is in charge.
Oh, that doesn't sound... Kafka just to me sounds kind of like Naked Lunch, where it's just
No. Kafka is not like... Naked Lunch is like they chopped up the novel and put different pieces together. It's like abstract art. Kafka-esque, I think the most well-known of his is the Metamorphosis.
Yeah,
the guy who turns into the cockroach. But probably the best examples of his, he has 2 other works. One's called The Tower, and one's called The Trial.
I was hoping the other one was called The Tunnel.
No. The Tower is about a guy who's got a message to deliver from one town to this big tower, and he can see it in the distance, but as he approaches it, the roads curve around it, and there's like a town outside of it, and he keeps trying to get to the tower, but either there's no clear way to get to it, or he keeps getting distracted by it, or the people like won't let him go to it.
So very, very much like a metaphor for red tape of some sort.
Yeah, and then the trial is a man who basically wakes up in the middle of night being arrested, and they won't tell him what he's being arrested for.
Oh god, that
and they're like, you know, oh, you need to fill out this paperwork in order to get this back. If you want to know this, you've got to talk to this judge. And so he goes to talk to the judge, and they're like, do you have an appointment for the judge? You need to go to this place to get an appointment in order to see the judge. Well, if you want to have an appointment, you got to have an ID. And where's your ID? Well, it's an evidence. So if you want evidence, you got to fill out this.
So this is Brazil.
Yeah.
It's Brazil.
It's Brazil. Brazil! Our hearts and minds and things it is.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so it's got kind of that feel to it. And I mentioned this earlier, that I was told, like, this wasn't really a true sequel, but it is absolutely... and this isn't, like, the first chapter, so this isn't even, like, spoilers, really. Because this is something you will find out as soon as you, like, start this. And honestly, if I had known this, I think I would have bought this faster and been a little bit more easier to read it. So I don't feel bad spoiling this part. But the story is told by the director of the Southern Reach, which is the people sending... He's the new director. because the old director decided that she was going to be in the 12th
She was the surveyor.
She was the psychologist.
Sorry, yeah.
The psychologist was the previous director of the Southern Reach, who maybe got a little bit too invested in the mystery and decided she had to go to see for herself.
Like a site supervisor in SCP.
Yeah. And of course, she didn't come back. But the thing about it is, the other 3 did come back. Just like the previous group.
Oh, fuck.
So you got the biologist who...
Isn't a biologist.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not sure yet. They're trying to interview her, but she has, like, no memories.
That's definitely not the biologist. We already know what the biologist... we already know what the biologist is doing.
They said they asked her, like... well, no, that is getting into spoilers. Yeah, it is basically dealing with the if not the biologist, then some sort of weird Lovecraftian creation, some sort of doppelganger.
Neo-weird science.
Yeah. Some sort of weird science. But, yeah.
It's a woman they made out of a computer, and she... No.
Yeah.
We're from the 80s, man. We know these things.
So this does directly follow it, not from the same character, and obviously there's a lot of stuff to imply that it isn't the same person, but some sort of weird doppelganger or something.
Yeah. We've already... the other previous book established that that's a very strong possibility.
That's something that the Area X does. Mm-hmm. What is interesting, though, when they picked her up, she wasn't at her home. They're like, she was in a weird field, like 2 blocks from her home, just staring into a pond.
Oh, God. That sounds about right, but also she had no one to just jump her bones.
Yeah.
Which she did. Her husband comes back, acts real weird, and she's just like, so I had sex with him. Yeah. I took whatever I could. Like, okay.
I thought it would maybe, snap him out of everything. Like, what guy doesn't like that?
Calm down.
It'd been 6 months or whatever. I don't blame her.
Yeah, well, yeah, fair point.
Plus, what are the chances that he's come home and been replaced by a weird extraterrestrial doppelganger?
Pretty 100% now.
I mean, yeah, we know that now, but at the time, they didn't really know anything. But the weird thing about this, right, or one of the interesting things about the first book was that no one had any names. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a stylistic choice, but they go out of their way to kind of explain why it is. They don't want the people in the expedition to have these really local connections. Mm-hmm. They want everyone to kind of know each other by their role. Yeah. That's why it's the biologist, the surveyor, the anthropologist.
Which I did really love the time when she actually read a name and heard a name for the first time in like months, and it just like it didn't like break her or anything, but yeah, there was just a little bit of like, oh, that's so weird to hear now.
Yeah, it's weird to hear a name after being trained to refer to everyone
by the biologist.
It's one of the weird things that goes unexplained about Area X. They're just like, yeah, in order for this to work, you've got to know each other as these. Mm-hmm. Like, keep that cemented in your head. That's part of like the conditioning. So it's really interesting to start up this and hear that the main character is named Control. And he kind of goes to explain about how, like, his grandfather gave him a name, and it's like a reference to old spy movies and stuff.
I thought you were saying that the biologist's name is Control.
No.
I was going to be incredibly upset because that's the dumbest fucking name I've ever heard.
The new director's name is Control. Oh. That you take, everything's from his perspective.
Oh, man.
And they try to explain it, but they really do, he goes in there and he's like, call me Control. And everyone's like,
is that a code name? No, that's my actual name.
That's what I want. It's not his actual name. They say, I think his actual name is John Rodriguez. But he specifically says, not John, not Mr. Rodriguez, call me Control. That's because he gets stuff done. And he wants to be like, again, he's trying to move in as this new director and take control of everything. And he has this thing where, there's the assistant director who was kind of hoping that she could be the director. And her name is Grace.
Actually,
which
Grace?
Her actual name is Grace, which is an actual name or whatever. And then just when it comes to, there are other characters who get names, but he often just refers to them as like the scientist, the doctor, etc., etc.
Piss boy.
Yeah. So it's like in the first one, it felt like this sort of interesting quirk, and in the second one, it kind of feels like a reach that they're really trying to like hammer home.
Southern Reach.
Yes. It's just, it makes me wonder if that's like a quality in all his books, or if that's just something he's like, yeah, I'll do the Southern Reach Trilogy, and in every book the characters won't have real names. They'll all be named after stuff.
And my name shall be Can.
It just reminds me of Sounder. From when did you ever read that in like elementary school?
No.
Sounder, it's from the perspective, it's a novel written from the perspective of like a dog who belongs to a family, and because it's a dog, he just knows it. Like all the other characters are like the man, the boy, the woman, the outsider, stuff like that. No one has actual names. And I just remember like even like reading this in like 3rd grade, like 6-year-old me being like, this is pretentious. Even I realize that this man is trying to sniff his own Aren't I weird breaking people down into their what they do, their roles in society?
As you take your little like your candy cigarette and you're like, this is pedantic.
My candy cigarette, just like bring up a little teacup full of chocolate milk, like, how predictable.
Why is it steaming?
I like it hot. Some like it hot.
Oh, no.
Well, speaking of that, I guess we should say thoughts on the Southern Reach organization as a whole.
They're a bunch of morons. They just keep throwing bodies at the situation, which again reminds me of the SCP Foundation, and that's as far as that's going to go. But they just keep throwing people at it, and smart people that they just could have like observing it in better ways than just like chuck them out there and just take the thing like.
Yeah, I really kind of want to spoil parts of this book, because the more you learn about the Southern Reach, the more it hammers home like they are not the SCP Foundation. There are a lot of things where it's like, you did what? Why would you think that? And they're like,
I mean, we thought the idea of yellow jumpsuits would be great.
It really is. I guess you don't care about spoilers, do you?
I don't, but they might, so let's hold on.
They're fine. Just tune out for like a minute, chat, if you're not interested in mild spoilers for Authority. But there's a lot of stuff where it's very much just sort of like, you don't know what you're doing at all. Like they've been studying this for like 50 years, and they're like, what is the border? What is it made of? Like, well, it's this big, and we know it extends up to the stratosphere, and you can't tunnel under it. They're like, but what? Like, can you analyze it? Could you know what's on? Have you stuck anything through? Like, no.
We have spectrometers. We have things that you can do. Now the funny thing is that like this implies that the mysteriousness of the psychologist as she was dying, where she's like, "You don't know anything." Like, bitch, you don't know anything either.
She knows more. Did you get to the part with the rabbits yet? Yeah, I did.
What about the rabbits there, Joe?
It's in order to.
Are they fluffy?
Yeah, again, they invisible border. Anything that goes through doesn't really come back, except through the gap. They've gotten stuff back through the gap, and people. They have brought people through the gap.
They built a gap in there. The Gap store.
Gap, no.
It's just a Gap store where they're like,
through the tunnel that they have. But they're still trying to figure out the wall itself, because again, they had people go through on the other side, and if they stick something through, it doesn't appear. A lot of predictions are like the wall like atomizes anything that touches it, they think.
Yeah.
And so to test that, they got about 1,000 rabbits, and they put cameras on them, and they herded them towards the side of the wall. And a bunch of them jumped in. And they do this thing where they're like trying to show the new director, they're like, here's all our evidence. And they're like, you're just killing a bunch of rabbits.
You knew the cameras wouldn't work. Why are you strapping cameras to them?
You're just hurting her. It's like, you've got a bunch of cool footage of like rabbits like disappearing into the void, and it looks very science fiction and mysterious, but none of the scientists can explain what's happening or why, or what this was meant to accomplish, just that it ended up killing a whole bunch of rabbits.
Did they recruit from science fairs in high schools?
No, it's very serious.
No, it's not. We're just going to strap cameras to a bunch of rabbits and throw it at the...
Yeah, and then they talk about also, they're like, I didn't think that rabbits would be very violent, but it turns out when they're cornered, they do attack, because it's like all these scientists in suits with like little plastic shields herding the rabbits forward, and when it gets down to like 100 of them, they start attacking the scientist. They're like, yeah, they bite pretty hard. They get, like,
have you seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail? It happens, bro.
The line of scientists broke and fled. And then they had to spend all this stuff. They have all these feeds from all this rabbit, but it's like the woods outside and inside Area X look the same, so they don't know if they're getting footage from inside or not. So they have to spend the next month tracking down all the rabbits with the trackers to see if they're actually, like, maybe one of the cameras is working now. Maybe it's fine inside.
I was being too generous when I said high school science fairs.
Yeah. It really just is a good example of, you throw people at something that, like, can't exist, that literally doesn't exist, and after, like, putting a bunch of spectrometers and stuff to it, they're like, I don't fucking know, and you get this idea, they're like, we've been here for 30 years, like, we've done everything you can do to this, and we still don't know anything about it. I don't know what they expect from us. We'll go out there and take readings again for the millionth time, but nothing has changed. Just keep sending people in. Maybe one of them will learn something. But yeah, going back to the questions, again, these are all from 3Do. No one else really submitted any questions. And he asks, where lies the strangling fruit that came from the hand of the sinner?
Topeka, Kansas.
Topeka, Kansas. That's where this is. Topeka, yeah.
That's where it's at.
Simple.
You wanted to ask the question, I give you the answer.
Walmart.
For $5.99.
Yeah, $5.99. Strangling fruit from the hand of the sinner. Mm-hmm. It's a steal. You buy one, get one free.
And
why would you need?
Truly a sin because you're stealing it.
No, it is one of those things. I guess for people who don't know, one of the big mysteries, one of the big conceits of the first novel is they find this underground tunnel, this spiraling like staircase going down into the ground that's made of like a weird, it's like an upside down tower. It's made of like some sort of weird fleshy substance, and they find like mold growing in the shape of letters with like little mysterious bugs crawling through it, and it's spelling out this long poem.
Kind
prose?
Of sermon, hymn,
kind
of prose thing.
Which starts with the where lies the strangling fruit that came from the hand of the sinner.
Yeah, no, it's just word salad to sound mysterious. That's basically how I interpret it. Like, do you want to sound deep? Talk about fruit and sin, and then ask where it's at.
Here we go. There's part of it in this one. Where lies the strangling fruit that came from the hand of the sinner? I shall bring forth the seeds of the dead, to share with the worms that gather in the darkness and surround the world, with the power of their lives, while from the dim-lit halls of other places forms that could never be writhe for the impatience of the few who have never seen or been seen. In the black water with the sun shining at midnight, those fruits shall come ripe, and in the darkness of that which is golden shall split open to reveal the revelation of the fatal softness in the earth. The shadows of the abyss are like the petals of the monstrous flower that shall bloom within the skull and expand the mind beyond that which any man can bear, and so on and so off and so forth.
Yeah, I was always impressed when Poison Ivy went through her goth phase.
It's one of those things where it's like, this is clearly from an author who really likes fiction. He's written like dozens of books. It doesn't feel like it should be just something pretentious sounding that means nothing. I'm pretty sure there is something that could be analyzed, but I just hate prose like that. And it's so, like, full of random seeming imagery.
Yeah.
That even, like, with a big vocabulary and sitting down and breaking it down, it really just doesn't seem like anything more than a word salad meant to sound deep.
Yeah. That's just how I see it in literally a salad, since it's mostly leaves.
Someone in chat's like, simple, eat seed, head explode. I get it, don't eat the seeds.
Yeah,
it's just a warning.
Don't eat seeds.
They could have saved so much time, just wrote, don't eat the seeds.
Yeah. And strangling fruit just means it's a vine that's low-hanging, so don't walk under it.
Yeah. 3Do in the chat is like, I think Vandermeer has admitted he heard it in a dream, so.
Oh. So it is basically just like dream
just a
logic.
Word salad.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly, I don't know, maybe the organizations not the organizations, the organisms in Area X just kind of throwing together random bits of, like, humanity and thoughts.
So it's an AI-generated bullshit? Yeah.
AI-generated poem! Exactly. Okay, next question. What do you think of the hypnosis element? You just don't like hypnosis and mind control stuff
mind control
in general.
at all. Like, in Wheel of Time, they have it, and I fucking hate it.
Compulsion.
It's not just compulsion, the other stuff, like the rings and just the brainwashing, mind control, any of that stuff. I did like the idea that, like, showing how uncomfortable it is from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't comfortable. I did not like it. I don't.
Yeah,
like
it doesn't really bother me all that much. It is kind of weird to see such a modern story lean into hypnosis, where, like, you know, at this point, at least from what I understand, looking at it, like 95% of hypnosis is just like bullshit.
No, actually, hypnosis. No, you're not gonna be like, I command you to do this, but like you can at least alter moods and
but
stuff.
that's like the extent of it, is like you can alter moods. They're like, you know, the title of the story, Annihilation, comes from, if you say that, someone's supposed to kill themselves. It's like, I don't think you can hypnotize someone into killing themselves.
No, but I feel like if they're in a mental fragile enough state, admittedly, Area X is a crazy enough place with enough maddening stuff that it probably leans into that.
It's just weird because everything else about this, like, you know, like I said, it goes into a real attempt to make this a grounded thing. How would real people deal with and interact with this unknown?
Yeah.
It takes place in our world, and this is the only supernatural event. But then there's also this, like, super hypnosis that works in a way that real hypnosis does not.
Admittedly, it's not super hypnosis. It's just really, really in-depth hypnosis, because they didn't just do it this isn't like a guy got up on stage and was like, you will kill yourself if you hear
this is mental conditioning and training over months and everything.
This is sleeper cell shit. This is like...
But again, sleeper cell shit doesn't exist in real life.
Yeah.
It's all just movie stuff.
Mm-hmm.
At least as far as I know, if anyone has examples of real hypnosis, like sleeper agents and stuff, I'd be interested to read about it. But everything that I've seen about it has been like, you know, it can alter your mood at best if you're susceptible to it, especially if it's gone long. And then there's stuff like the CIA did things with trying to mind control people using LSD combined with hypnosis.
It worked perfectly fine. Everything went well.
Well, you know, just don't look up MK Ultra. Nothing shady going on there. They didn't, like, completely make people schizophrenic and break from reality.
Nobody fucking killed themselves.
Yeah. But it's just that idea of, like, hypnosis can maybe do some of this stuff if you're being, like, trapped in a prison and isolated and force-fed drugs that change your perception of reality.
Not to mention the fact that I'm sure that there is some residual, like, crap BS shit from the Area X, whatever.
Yeah, like, maybe that makes it more active, or it's one of those things where, like, it didn't take me out of the story. It was fine in the moment. You kind of learn to accept it, again, because they do sort of start out by just having it be like a mood thing.
And sleep.
Yeah. They don't really, no, not doing it that way. And it does do a lot to help set the mood of, again, like, the whole idea of the first book, why it's so unsettling, is that you're not sure exactly what's real.
Yeah.
And part of that going into is not just Area X itself being strange, but also, like, the characters' minds are being fucked with.
Oh, yeah.
And especially they mention, right, that, like, because one of the key things is the main character breaks out of the hypnosis. She becomes unsusceptible to it, but kind of pretends to go along with it so that the psychologist doesn't kick her off the mission or whatever.
Or kill her.
Yeah, or kill her. But they have this moment where the psychologist is like, you will continue to see the tower as being made out of bricks and mortar. And then she's like, wait, it's not made out of bricks and mortar? What does the psychologist see that it's made out of? Because it looks just like a tower. And then when she goes back the second time, that's when she notices that the walls are made of some, like, living organic material, some kind of flesh.
Now, the other thing that they talk about that's kind of like that, whereas, like, how many of your, the psychologist, like, flat out, like, how many of those memories before the Area X do you think is actually yours? And they do nothing with that.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I had sex with my weird spore husband. I remember that. I remember my parents being shitty. I remember being
a biologist. Yeah. I guess we'll find out in Authority. So there is one more thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, which is, what do you think of the biologist as a character? Because I think I was telling you about this beforehand, where when you started this, it had a very clear, like, science fiction, again, Lovecraftian element to it, where you're drawn in because you want to know about Area X. And by the end of it, you're really just kind of invested in the biologist and how is she going to survive? Is she going to find out what happened to her husband? Like, is she going to survive her ordeal with the crawler? Like, is she going to find the bottom of the tower? What's going on there? So that it really does feel like a vehicle for a character analysis, like, wrapped in a bow of weird fiction.
Yeah. It's kind of like a morality play put in, like, space or something like that. This is a character study smashed into a neo-weird science story.
Yeah.
But going on to the biologist character, I started off really just not liking her, just because she was very cold and distant, much like her husband would have said about her. Just like she's just
a ghost bird.
She's a ghost bird, which is an adorable name. I'm stealing that, by the way. Sorry, author. I'm stealing that nickname. It's adorable. But essentially, at the end of it, I felt for her epiphany. I did like the realization that she had at the end. Like we said, that she saw the unknown, seeing that she knew very little of it, and then decided that wasn't this pursuit that she wished to go for. Yeah. She wished to continue her connection and actually deepen it.
The unknown she would rather know about is not the mystery of Area X, but the mystery of what happened to her husband, who was on the previous expedition. In the same way that, you know, as us as readers coming into this wanting to know about Area X and ending up just wanting the biologist to be okay.
And yeah, also, and it's not really like a scientific curiosity, it's a deeply personal one. It's framed like the way she says, when she says like, I want to just have him near me. That it does, I love that because it tosses out any like, I want to know what happened to him, I'm fascinated. As she would have said like, 2 chapters before, she would have just been like, I would have been fascinated by what happened to my husband. And this, like, and then she's very much, she's eschewed any kind of, like, distance that she wants to take when she wants to come at this personally. And that was really nice.
Yeah. It was really interesting for me because, I mean, you know this because you and I are friends, and it might sound weird to some of the readers, but, like, I am a very solitary person. Like, I live alone, and I kind of prefer it that way. I don't spend a lot of time with friends. I need a lot of alone time. I'm very much the introvert who would rather read a book, who would rather explore things and learn things on my own than go out and like have a party or hang out with friends and stuff. It's kind of work for me to maintain these relationships. And reading The Biologist at first, I was almost like, oh, she's just like me for real. You know, she has a lot of stuff, and then as it went on, they do a lot to like humanize her, but it also kind of struck me as like, this author is not someone who really gets it, who is the same like introvert like I am, because he adds in all these elements that like, yeah, I get regular people would see that and maybe like her more, but it made me dislike her more as it went on. I was still engrossed by the end. Like, I still liked her. I still liked her story and everything. But by the end, I no longer felt like this was, like, the avatar for me. This is someone who's living my life. Because the more you learn about her, the more you learn that it's diverged and everything.
She didn't turn into a Keanu Reeves where you could just, like, implant yourself over her and be like, I am the biologist. It's like, oh, the biologist is her own person. And I don't like her, but I root for her because she's an interesting character.
Yeah. This is almost, like, deeply personal, but I've never really felt, like, a strong connection with, I think anyone. I don't think I've ever been, like, 100% completely myself around anyone. I try to be pretty open. Like, I try to actively put myself and put stuff out there, even when it feels awkward or whatever. But I've never felt like someone gets me. And so it's interesting to read a book where I almost felt it, and then it just kind of like went away.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's just because I'm so introspective and so looking at all these different things that I would never meet someone like that unless they were literally me. Like, they have to be so exactly like it. But it's interesting to see someone have, like, 10 traits, and then they add 10 more, and none of the 10 are like it. But the first 10 were, like, perfectly on there. And I guess the reason I put this on here, because this was the one question I added on there, I was like, anyone else? I'm curious what other people think about the biologist, especially if you are more outgoing. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of really outgoing readers out there. I feel like reading is almost inherently a kind of, like, personal, solitary thing. You're not super outgoing. You're still kind of a nerd.
Okay. A nerd is not synonymous with being introverted. I am single by choice. I'm an outgoing person. It's just that a lot of social norms do get in the way of actually having conversations with people. But that is a social discussion of a different type.
Yeah, that's an entirely different thing. But yeah, I'm just curious if there are other readers out there. What did you think about it? That's my question to you. Mm-hmm. I guess you could talk about the other questions and stuff and what you think. I mean, it's a free country. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just try not to use any slurs in the comments.
Until the liberals get to... No,
But that was about... Did you have anything else that you wanted to really speak on?
I did enjoy the setting of Area X, but at the same time as it being very disorienting and how it's very strange, but also grounded... I never got a good map of it in my head, even though they discussed about the distances and all these different things.
And the lighthouse and the marshes. And I felt like they painted a pretty good picture of it. I kind of knew it. I just always kind of felt like there was the same thing going on with Area X as there was going on with the tower. Mm-hmm. Like, I imagine if you see the tower completely off of hypnosis, or maybe even just like... If you saw it objectively, you would see it some sort of weird nightmare hellscape where everything was made out of flesh and the things you thought were boars were actually like weird animals. And it was just so different that your mind like made things fit your perception of it.
Like Cincinnati.
It's like, oh, everyone sees this as a lighthouse, but you're not actually in a lighthouse. They kind of did that with the tower itself, but it wasn't... They never went, like, full bore with it. The fact that she broke out of the hypnosis kind of made it seem like, okay, so everything is kind of real. But I always... Because it has such a dreamlike quality to it, and because everything's so uncertain, I was still like, if they did have something where she woke up and, like, the sky was purple and the grass was actually, like, white little worms crawling around, I wouldn't be, like, completely shocked. I'd be like... Now it's coming together. Oh, that makes sense.
All I could think of when you said was this: you're in a lighthouse, but it's not a lighthouse. You're in a Denny's. Or
you're in a Denny's.
You're in a Shoney's or something. I don't know.
It's funny. I don't know what exactly that trope is called. This idea of like seeing something and not being able to like comprehend it, so like mapping it onto something else.
It's like you described it in another thing. Like you were watching the Fourth Kind.
Yeah, okay, I've told that before.
You've told me that story before, and it freaked me the fuck out. I can't hear owls in the middle of the night and not think about it. But yeah, like their Fourth Kind, for short synopsis, is
an awful movie. Absolutely dreadful. They tried to do some weird experimental shit with it, and it did not work at all.
But it's basically like an investigation into alien abductions. And they put they talked to interview some people, and they're interviewing this guy. They put him under hypnosis, and just ask him to run through what happened to him on there as best he can remember. And one of the descriptions he says is that like he starts seeing
there's an owl outside of his window. And they're like, an owl? They're like, it's not an owl. And they're like, what is it? And he just like frowns really deeply and starts shaking his head. And he's like, it's an owl. It has to be an owl. It's the most like effective, unsettling thing they do. And then like they show like a picture of an owl, but like its eyes are kind of like getting bigger, where it's like he's seeing an alien, but his mind like refuses to admit that it's an alien. And it's like that's the one thing from that movie that like absolutely nailed this like Lovecraftian horror, that they were trying to go for.
And this is from The Fourth Kind.
Yeah, it's an old movie called The Fourth Kind. That it was trying to do the whole found footage thing around the same time, a little bit after Blair
big.
Witch. Yeah, when it became big.
No, it came out a little bit after Paranormal Activity.
Oh, was it? I thought it was before Paranormal Activity.
No, it was around the same time as Paranormal Activity. It was during the big boom of everybody wants to do found footage.
Yeah, basically they wanted to do found footage, but they also wanted to be theatrical. So they start the movie by having, like, some famous actress come out, and she'd be like, "Hi, I'm this actress, but I'm playing this character. The footage you're going to see is sometimes dramatized and sometimes real." So they'd have, like, the abduction scenes would be someone in a room talking to a psychologist describing it, and then, like, a Hollywood, like, very, like, dramatized version of what they were describing, and they would, like, split the screen and show both at once, and it's like, that really does not work. You cannot get into either one.
Clearly these people have never watched anything from the Discovery Channel where they would have that, where it's like, big fish monsters. Yeah. What happened when I got pulled under by one of the biggest carp I've ever seen.
Yeah, those don't work either, at least not to build, like, actual scares. And like I said, the thing about it that made it so interesting to me is that, like, the effective parts were the people in therapy just trying to describe it. Which, to be clear, was not real, but they filmed it with, like, handheld cameras, and the actors were very downplayed so that it came across looking really real. And that's the thing that stuck with me. All of the CGI and, like, Hollywood stuff just don't remember
basically everything that was great about the original Paranormal Activity. Where people were like, did they die? Did they actually... Is this a snuff film? Like, why would this be making millions? Whatever. But, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that's called, but I had that feeling the entire time reading this book of just, like, things maybe aren't what they seem at all, and, like, maybe the entire world is just an illusion. When the psychologist said, like, do you even remember if your memories are real? I was afraid they were going to go hard into that trope and be like, Area X is what everything has been all along, and you've been crazy, or just some, like, random tangent and shit. And I'm glad that they didn't butcher it like that. No. Like, who knows? There's still 2 more books. Yeah, maybe I'll find out by the end.
And you'll find out that it's all a simulation, that it's a simulation of Pong, and you're all in the little dot as it's moving from one block to the next.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's just about all we had to say on Annihilation. This is maybe a shorter episode than usual, but that's to be expected because it's a shorter book than usual. But let us know what you thought about it. I'm already reading the second book. If this turns out to be really good, even if it's really bad, if there's something worth talking about, that's what makes it for this show. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So we might come back with this one, maybe the third book, combine them both together and just have one follow-up episode. That might give us enough for both.
Yeah, we can do an anti-Southern grab trilogy.
Oh, you and your puns. Why did we do that? And yeah, just in general, you'll have to let us know, what did you think of the face cams? Do you prefer it like this? Do you not like us staring? Would you prefer just to, like, if the background's just going to be this and just us sitting here, would you prefer it to just not be anything?
Buy us big chairs. We want big red chairs to sit in, and we want big versions of the book that we can pull open and be like, yes, the story. This is
not a story time channel.
I want a story time
also,
channel.
I'm not sure if I could fit them in this room. This room's not exactly big.
Well,
I mean, you
then
all
get a
at home
bigger
can't tell, but
room.
I have to buy us another house. I'll buy the chairs if you get me another, like, $100,000 so I can buy a new house. That would be cool. Or if nothing else, maybe just get a better background. Pay an artist to draw something. Some kind of big fireplace. Well, that might be too much like OSP.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah.
Either way, thank you for coming. Thank you again for 3Do for suggesting this. If you're looking forward for more Legs Talk About Books, we will be doing another episode in January.
The start of it all. We're doing it.
That is, we've talked about this before, but we joined the Kickstarter for Brandon Sanderson's, like, 4 novels that he wrote in 2020 during the pandemic.
That fucking mad lad.
Yeah.
Man.
Like, I wrote 4 novels, and we'll be doing that, and he's going to be launching them at the start of 2023, one every 3 months. And we're going to be getting all those and probably making episodes about all those. So if you're interested, we'll be back for that. And if we get other requests, maybe we'll come back.
Yeah.
And again, maybe the sequel to this if it ends up being really exciting.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Hard to leg.
You did it. Anyway, until next time, keep reading and stuff. Annihilation! Annihilation!
I'm not going to kill myself.
No, that's for the audience.
I know, but that's the
And then they... Oh, wait, no. I want them to subscribe. Fuck. Don't annihilate. What's annihilation backwards? Noe talihian. Hina.
I think you've lost him at this point.